If you're a reader like me, then inevitably you're going to come to a point in your reading life where you're going to need to unhaul. But when it comes to unhauling, how do you know what books to unhaul? I'm going to discuss 10 questions with you in this video that may help to assist you to determine which books to unhaul and why. Before I do, for those of you who don't know, which is absolutely fair, it took me a moment to learn, I'm going to define what unhauling means. In my view, the term unhaul or an unhauling is just a nicer way of saying get rid of. So we could very nicely on booktube come in and say I'm getting rid of some books, but instead there is this term called an unhaul, which is the opposite to a haul, which means to get some books, to purchase some books or receive some books, bring some books in. You're hauling them, you're taking them in, and then there's the unhaul where you get rid of them. So yeah, whether you are calling it I'm getting rid of books, or whether you're calling it I'm doing an unhaul, here are 10 questions to consider when it comes to unhauling your books that may help make that process easier. Because what I found, especially when I first began, is that it's one thing to want to unhaul books for whatever reason, quite another to go through your bookshelf of all these books you've collected and kind of like children in a way go, which ones are my favorites and which ones can I actually get rid of? And you find yourselves very stressed out by this idea, and then suddenly you just don't unhaul because you just can't bear to part with any of them. So what do you do? Alright, let's jump right in. Here are those 10 questions before we get into it. If you have not already, please do subscribe to the channel. It really does help me out. Hit the notification bell, ding, so that you can be notified each and every time I upload a video. If you like the video, hit the like button, and if you have any comments, down in the space below is where to leave it. Alright, now, once and for all, let's begin the questions. Question number 1. Ask yourself if you truly need to unhaul right now. Why are you unhauling? What's gotten you to this point? Do you have overly stuffed bookshelves or an overly stuffed bookshelf and you just can't fit another book in there, so you have to unhaul in order to get space for more books? Or is it unnecessary? If the unhaul is unnecessary because you do have more space and you don't need to unhaul and you therefore find yourself not wanting to unhaul, that is okay. You don't have to unhaul. Just because you had the idea at one point in time that that's what you wanted to do doesn't mean you necessarily have to go through with it. So if you don't have to unhaul and determine that you don't want to, that's absolutely fine. But if you have found that there is no other choice, you are going to be buried under your books unless you do something now, then let's move forward. Question number 2. This may seem a bit obvious after I say it, but some people don't consider this, so let's put it out there. Do you have any 1-star books or DNFs? So, for those of you who don't know, a DNF stands for did not finish. You pick up a book, you make it to a certain point, you decide the book is no longer for you, and you've determined you are not going back to the book ever again. So, it is a DNF. Unlike a shelf, where you start a book, you get to a certain point, and you decide you don't want to continue on at the moment, but you will return to it, so you shelve it for another time. If you have any DNFs that are taking up way too much space in your bookshelf, why are you hanging on to them? You're not going to read them anymore. Unhaul them. It's very simple. You may have 10 DNF books in your bookshelves that will give you so much space, and you're not going to go back to them. Unhaul those. That's a quick and easy one. And as for the 1-star books, yeah, look, I review my books on Goodreads. It just makes it a whole lot easier for me. I know that some people have issues with Goodreads, and I can understand that. But Goodreads have a section called My Books, and if you go there, you can very easily see what you've rated each book that you have rated. And if you have 1-star books, why are you hanging on to a 1-star book? You don't need it, so you can get rid of it. Now, there could be many reasons why you're hanging on to a DNF or a 1-star book, and just, you know, my views are, of course, my own. I should have had that disclaimer at the start. But yeah, in my opinion, There's no need to hang on to any books you DNF'd at all. And if you're hanging on to a 1-star book because it's a part of a series where every other book got a high rating and you want to keep the series complete, I understand that. But particularly if you have a 1-star book that is a standalone, why are you hanging on to it? If you need to do an unhauling to create space, 1-star books and DNFs will definitely be a great way to start. Question number 3. What is the goal of your bookshelf or bookshelves? Cater to that. So, oh my goodness. I mean, I don't want to have too much of a backstory here, but I started off my channel in January of 2020 with no books at all. If you go back to my earliest booktube videos, you will see I have no bookshelves at all. And then I ended up with one shelf that was like 8 cubed bookshelf. Then I ended up with a standard white bookshelf, and then my sister gave me a black bookshelf that she was no longer using, so now I have 3 bookshelves. But over the course of time, I've had different goals, if you will, that I've wanted to achieve with my bookshelves. And currently, 2 of the shelves that I have are different to the rest in that they are shelves purely for one author. I literally have an entire shelf dedicated to Brandon Sanderson, as I love him. He's my favorite fantasy author and male author of all time. And I now am just about having an entire shelf filled with Amanda Flower works. Amanda Flower being an adult cozy mystery writer, in case you didn't know. And she's my favorite female author of all time. Aside from this, I like to have each shelf be dedicated to a genre or more than one. I mean, currently I have about 2 1/3 shelves dedicated just to cozies. But, you know, that's a different plan that's come about over time. But yeah, each other shelf that's not a Brandon Sanderson or an Amanda Flower shelf, I'm just looking at them now as I talk to you, have different genres. So I have a dystopian shelf, I have a fantasy shelf, I have a sci-fi shelf, I have a mystery thriller shelf, I have an LGBTIQ plus shelf, I have a in my cubed bookshelf, I have a horror cube, I have a romance cube, I have a contemporary cube, I have a memoir cube. So I like to do it surrounding genres, as well as having those 2 authors that I have a dedicated shelf for. So for my goals, it would be to have as many books in that genre that I can that will fill a certain shelf. And so because of that, I would be trying to cater my goal towards making sure that I have an equal number of books to that genre, for each genre, or to maybe I would unhaul if I have, say, 3/4 of that shelf is filled with one genre and then there's a bit of overflow. Maybe try and unhaul the overflow or take the overflow out so that I have room for more of that genre on that shelf and try and put the overflow somewhere else, and where I put that, unhaul those books. So do you have a goal for your bookshelf or bookshelves? Cater to that. Question number 4. Okay, you loved this book or those books, but are you going to read them again? One of my favorite booktubers of all time used to have that saying whenever they would do an unhaul video. I love these books. I gave them 5 stars, but I'm not going to read them again, so there's no point in hanging on to them, so I'm going to unhaul. And I think that's a very fair way to do it. If you don't plan on reading the books again, then what's the point of hanging on to it? Now, there are many answers that you could give me to that question that I would say are absolutely fair. So please know I understand that. But if you look at a book and you think, I love this book, but I don't plan to read it again, it's okay. It can go. That is a great way to think about how you're going to unhaul a book. Now, you may look at a book and say, that is a great book. I'm not going to read it again, but I don't want to get rid of it because it's a beautiful book. That is absolutely fair as well. So consider, are you going to read the book again? And if not, is it okay for that one to go on the unhaul pile? Which very nicely brings us to question number 5. Are you going to miss this book when it's gone? Now, this could put you into a tailspin, because I know it could do that with me, where, okay, maybe not every book on my bookshelf, but most of them. Had you asked me this question, are you going to miss this book or those books when it's gone? I would think, yes, I am, and now I really don't know what to do, Mr. Francy. So if you're responding with that, I'm sorry, but it is another question to consider. If you look at a book and it as my mother would say, it doesn't spark joy, or in my words, you're not going to miss it when it's gone, well, it's the perfect book to unhaul. Question number 6. Are you keeping the book for an unnecessary reason? I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by this so you understand. All of my books on my bookshelf, it doesn't matter what section they're in on my shelves, I like to arrange from tallest to shortest where I can. This doesn't always work out because sometimes when I purchase books, I notice that some books are shorter than others in the exact same series, and there's nothing I can do. But in any case, one shelf that is different to all the others is my LGBTIQ+ shelf, because that one is a rainbow shelf. I don't generally like the rainbow aesthetic, but to each their own. If you have a rainbow aesthetic for your entirety of your bookshelves, fantastic if that works for you. It doesn't work for me. But with my LGBTIQ+ section, I do. I have them in the order of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, white, and I also have a black book at the end because I read a book that happened to have a black cover. That was an LGBTIQ+ book. So back to the question and trying to elaborate on, are you keeping the book for an unnecessary reason? I only have one red book on my LGBTIQ+ shelf, and it would seem very weird for me to get rid of that book because then I would be starting at orange and not have a book that represents the red. But if I think about that critically, or think about it in a way that zooms away from outside of my own thoughts and feelings, I would go, but Mr. Francy, that's just silly. Did you like the book? And in all honesty, I did not really like that book that much at all and would normally get rid of it. So question yourself, are you keeping a book for an unnecessary reason? That red book could go. It won't be going because I just can't get out of that frame of mind. I need a red book to start the rainbow shelf. But yeah, is it an unnecessary reason, and can you bear to part with it? Question number 7 is a big one that has assisted me in the past, and that is, can being more creative help you to not unhaul? Okay, I'm going to explain what I mean. Okay, so picture this. You have, like me, 3 bookshelves. You may have 1. Make it work for you, whatever you have. I have 3. So you have 3 bookshelves, and they are stacked to the brim. You cannot fit any more books in there. Some people have said to me, my books look like they are stuffed in and squeezed so tight, and that used to be the case. It's not so much anymore. But the reason for that was because I wanted to not unhaul any books and fit in as many as I can into that particular shelf. Okay, so how can being more creative help you? Well, instead of having the books going across vertically, maybe you could stack them horizontally. So if you have a 3-book series, one way to make it really pretty could be to stack book 3 at the bottom, book 2 above that, and then have book 1 literally sitting upwards so it's outwardly facing. Maybe that would create more room. I mean, it may be that's the case. It may be that it's not the case. Who knows? But if there's a creative way of stacking the books that creates more room for you, and therefore would mean you wouldn't need to unhaul the books, then that's certainly something for you to consider. So I know for me, for sure, now I wouldn't do this now, but I have in the past, that to give you an example, I'm just counting these books now live while I'm filming this. I have 9 books so far in the Amish Candy Shop series by Amanda Flower. There are 8 standard novels, but I also have 1 book that is a collection of 3 novellas, totaling 9 physical books that I have. Now, it would take up a lot less space if I were to have them stacked horizontally, rather than having them stacked vertically. So if you have long series, that is definitely an option for you to do, and it would help to create more space. So, can being more creative help you to not unhaul? Question number 8, I would have answered with a resounding no until maybe a month or so ago. And that question is, do you have outward-facing books? Okay, you may have seen booktubers do this. I have. I love the idea, and I'll quickly explain to you. So whether it be book 1, the final book, or a book in the middle of that series, or just a book that you like, sometimes a way that a particular booktuber will display a book they love is Instead of stacking it in the traditional way where you see the spine, what faces you outwards is not the spine but the cover of the book. So do you know what I mean? So you'll have, in that bookshelf, you might have an outward facing book, and then next to that you have spine, 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 all the way, the rest of the way through. Or you might have spine, 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 outward facing book, spine, 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 spine. And so it displays that one book that you have outwardly facing. I currently have the most recent Hayley Powell Food and Cocktail Mystery Series book outwardly facing, and I did have Murders and Metaphors by Amanda Flower outwardly facing, but I recently fixed that, and I'll explain why. If you have an outwardly facing book, it does look beautiful. It does enhance the look of the shelves. Don't get me wrong. But in the event where you are deciding whether or not to unhaul books and you don't want to, by taking that outwardly facing book and putting it back to being spine outwardly facing, you've suddenly created space. Depending on how wide that book is across the width of the cover, you've created enough space to add another 2 or 3 books into that section. So consider taking any outwardly facing books that you have and turning it back to its spine facing out, and that will grant you more space. And if you don't want to consider that, then that's fine. If you want to keep it the way it is, that's fine. Then you need to go back to, okay, let's definitely unhaul, because I don't want to give up that space that I would have by taking my outwardly facing book and putting it spine facing out. Question number 9. For those of you who are really struggling, you have no choice but to unhaul. You cannot fit another book in that shelf or shelves of yours, but you have a TBR on the way and you must have room, but you can't bear to get rid of the books. What do you do? Here's a question that may help you. Do you have somewhere else to put your books? Yeah, so a lot of people don't really consider this as an option. A lot of people, when they consider unhauling books, a book or more than one, just consider that it needs to go. It needs to completely leave you. But that's not necessarily the case. Do you have another room you could put the books in? Do you have somewhere else in that particular room where you could just store the books? Do you have a storage unit? You may not. My family has a storage unit, and I think I have about 10 books in there. For me, if I unhaul, I'm happy. I've accepted the fact that I've unhauled them, but since I do have 10 books in there, I thought I would bring this up as a point. But yeah, do you have another room? Maybe they could go in your lounge room. Maybe there's some space in your kitchen. I don't know if you'd want to put your books in the kitchen unless they were cookbooks, but there's an option. Maybe you have a guest room, and maybe your guests would like to read some books. Yeah, put some books in there. There you go. There's some ways to put them somewhere else where you don't necessarily have to unhaul them so they're no longer with you. And question number 10 is a question that I always consider, and it is one that I think you should too. I am a massive believer in a book should always have a second chance at life. I may not love a book, but one of the greatest things about readers is that we are not a monolith. What I mean by this is that we don't all think, react, feel the same way about a book. I may absolutely hate a book, and someone else may absolutely love that exact same book, because we're just different people. So question number 10 is, do you have any books that you know someone else will love? So if you're really umming and ahhing and have no idea which book or books you're going to get rid of, have you come across a book where you think, oh my gosh, so-and-so will love this or love these books? Grab those books, give them to so-and-so. Now, I will put a very big asterisk onto this point. I don't care who the person is that you're giving these books to, how much you trust them, how much you love them. If you take up this option, consider them for your own sanity to be gone. Consider them to be that person's books moving forward. If you loan books to someone, you assume the risk that those books won't come back, or worse, damaged. So you assume that risk. But it is, going back to the nicety of it, it's a great way to think of others. You know, this person will love this book, I didn't love this book, so let me give it to them. Just, in your mind, say to yourself, I'm giving it to them, It's theirs now. It's no longer mine. That's the best advice I can give you, because I've had people I've trusted in the past where I've lent many things to, not just books, but predominantly books, where I've thought, yeah, I absolutely trust them and it's going to be fine, and then I don't get them back, or I don't get them back for ages, or they're wrecked, or whatever it is. If I give books to someone, then I, do it with the assumption they're yours now, and that's it. They're no longer mine. Another thing to consider along that wavelength is it doesn't just need to be anyone that you know. Are there other types of people who may appreciate this book and not you? To give you an example without naming the name, my mother works at a cancer hospital, literally a hospital that's only has cancer patients. They have a library, and in that library, one half of the library is dedicated to selling books, and all of the books goes back into that hospital's funding to do things for the patients. And the other half is a lending library for the patients to be able to loan out books. And my mum brought this up with me, and I said to her, I have so many books that would be great for cancer patients, and some of the books that I've given have included cozy mysteries, which my mother reported back to me saying the librarian found them to be fantastic, and the patients love the cozies as well, because the cozy element helps to take them out of what they're going through. Whether it be a cozy mystery or another type of genre, it'll be the same way as well. So it doesn't necessarily need to be someone you know. Prior to my mother working at this cancer hospital, because now I exclusively give her all of my books, because if I can give them a book to read while they're going through something so horrible, I mean, why wouldn't I do that? I'm so happy to do that for them. But what I used to do was give it to charity stores. So we have a Salvation Army here, we have a St. Vinny's here, and many other different charity thrift shops here in Australia that you can give them to, where people who may not necessarily have the money to purchase a brand new book would be able to go into these stores and purchase a book that is significantly cheaper. So a book that I may have paid $22 for, they may pay $1 for. And hey, it gives that book, again, a second chance at life, which is something that means a lot to me. There is one book that I've read in my entire booktube career that I wanted to throw in the trash because I didn't want anyone else to have it. But I didn't. I was kind. I did not do that. I ended up donating it. But, and I donated it to the charity store because I didn't want the cancer patients to have this book because it was a horrible book. I'm sorry. It wasn't sending the right message at all. It was very offensive. And so therefore I didn't want the cancer patients to have that one. But anyway, but otherwise, each and every book that I read, if I don't want it anymore, it deserves a second chance at life. So that's something else for you to consider. But there you go. If you're considering unhauling books at the moment, here were 10 questions that I hope will assist you to determine if you need to unhaul, and if so, how to go about the process of determining which of your favourite children you should unhaul and which ones are safe to be left behind. I mean, I may sound crazy to the standard observational viewer or listener to this video, but if you know, you know, right? Am I right? If you know, you know. These books, to me, I mean, I probably have about 200 books on my shelves at the moment. I'm just looking at them as I speak, and they are literally like children to me. And how do I choose this child above this child to be the one to unhaul? But hopefully these questions do help assist you to determine which books would be the best ones for you to unhaul. Do you have any other tips when it comes to unhauling, or any experiences you'd like to share when it comes to unhauling? Let us all know in the comments section below. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it. I wish you all the very best of luck when it comes to unhauling, because one of the greatest things that we can do once we have unhauled is, now we have the space, we can buy more books! Yay! Have you all seen those memes, just quickly, that are going around where it's like, here's a look at my TBR, and you have like all these shelves that are stacked to the brim, and the meme says something like, here we go, I'm all satisfied, my bookshelves are filled, and then, you walk into a bookstore, ooh, a book, and, they're walking out with a whole pile of books. I mean, that's me, I probably shouldn't buy any more books, but I do, because there are more that I want to read. One of the greatest things about creating that space is you can buy more books and put them in to that new space you've created. Alright everyone, now that is where I'm going to leave it. Letting you all go with peace, blessings, and so much love. Please do be kind and love one another and spread your sparkling energy all throughout the world. And once you have unhauled those books and picked up the next one you're about to read, happy reading! Bye everyone!